Sam, the show started. Just play it cool. Pretend like we meant for this to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I guess we'll just have to go for it. Welcome to another episode of Geeking Out About It. My name is Jacob. And this is Sam. And this week we're going to be talking about video games, but more importantly, retro games and just how meaningful they are to so many people. Sam, are you just going to sit there and play video games all night?
Yeah, man, you got this. You got this.
Okay. Well, then if you're not going to help me, I'll just have to go ahead and get started. Okay. Well, since Sam is busy in gaming, let's talk about retro games. Let's define what a retro game is besides just old. There are countless definitions out there, and of course, many of the definitions counter each other. So for the show, we're just going to define retro gaming with a couple of things. Age-wise, about 20 years of age or older, so before 2000. If the series is still relevant today, there has to at least be a few iterations of the game for us to be considering it retro. Also, games that have had remakes or been updated due to popularity, we are also considering. Now, some people don't consider games from the 70s to be retro. They only consider games from the 80s and 90s, but we're going to be reaching back to the 70s as well. So, our definitions are not steadfast, and they're just being used for the purposes of this show. But before we talk about games, I think we have to talk a little bit about computers. And, well, I think let's start with the abacus. Okay, no, probably not. That's actually a little far back, and we don't have enough time for that. So we'll say a bunch of important stuff happened, and a few stepping stones were covered. But I will say that many great minds were thinking about how to get a machine to do complex math problems well before World War II. In the late 1800s, the mathematician Charles Babbage invented many computing machines in an attempt to create an analytical engine. This attempt laid down the framework for many modern computers. He developed components working together and to complete one task. He made the first form of CPU, or central processing unit, the equivalent to a human brain. If we jump forward a little bit to Vannevar Bush creating the differential analyzer at MIT, his device was limited in its abilities, but it started the spread of these big machines. We also have Howard Atkin's work with the digital calculators working off Babbage's work to create fully functional computers. He collaborated with IBM to do this, and we see the birth of the Harvard Mark I. At the same time as Atkin and Bush were working away, we have Alan Turing in the mid-1930s working to find an answer to if a machine is capable of solving any mathematical problems. Turing's work during World War II, along with previously mentioned inventors and many more names, laid the framework, inspiration, and funding from governments and the private sector that gave more inventors and programmers the ability to advance this technology into computers capable of running software. There's so much history that we could take a whole episode on that, but I think that's enough for now. Have anything to add to that, Sam?
Computers are great. They're really good. They do a lot of things.
Okay, so let's talk about the first few consoles and games. There's some talk of who really invented the first video game, but many sources say the first video game was invented by physicist William Higginbotham in 1958 and is similar to the more popular game of Atari Pong. The game was called Tennis for Two, and its creation is notable, as it inspired, as I mentioned, Atari's Pong. Now, Tennis for Two was originally played on an oscilloscope hooked up to a computer with two controllers, and aptly named as the small white pixel moved from one side of the cathode ray tube to the other. Higginbotham had no idea what the small game that he created would start. As computers became more powerful, companies began trying to put gaming units into arcades and into the home. In 1964, the first video game patent was given to Sanders Associates, whom Magnavox bought it from soon after. In 1972, Magnavox came out with the first home gaming unit, the Odyssey, inspired by the earlier brown box prototype. The Odyssey had 28 games and hooked directly up to the TV. There was no sound on the system, as with many early gaming consoles, there wasn't. Even though Magnavox was the first, their systems would soon fade away into history. Their units had many iterations, except none of them really stuck. They laid down some groundwork. They were the first, but they were soon overtaken by others, more popular units like the Atari Pong unit and the Atari 2600. The Sega system would also help take over part of the market. A lasting effect of Magnavox games may not be around, but one of them did inspire the famous Atari Pong. Sam, you ever played Pong?
Yeah, man. Pong's great because it allowed people to play games more accessibly, and it was like an easy game to comprehend, so it was just like, you could get involved right away.
Yeah. Continuing with Pong, in the early 70s, Atari came out with their arcade machine, Pong, and then in 1975 released a home console because of the game's popularity. They sold thousands of these arcade cabinets. Finding an original cabinet today would cost a pretty penny, upwards of $4,000. Now, moving forward into the late 70s, Fairchild and RCA and Coleco jumped into the ring and came out with home consoles as well. Both Fairchild and RCA didn't have much success, but the Coleco Telstar had enough traction to go on. The Coleco did produce a few more iterations of gaming consoles, but soon faded as well. Atari in the late 70s released Video Pinball and Stunt Cycle, with Coleco coming out with the Telstar Ranger and the Colormatic. The home console game scene was heating up as new games were being released, and there was a future beginning to develop. A new genre of game, entertainment, began to grow. And with that, I think we're gonna cut to a quick break. We'll see you in a moment.
Student Multimedia Studios is your one-stop shop for all of your printing and production needs. If you need a poster for a class or a presentation, we've got you covered with our large format printers. In addition, we check out all of the equipment you could need for your projects and offer production consulting in our studio spaces. Making a video or taking photos for a class? We have studios for photos, videos, and audio. Student Multimedia Services is located on the main floor of the Valley Library, and you can find our hours posted at oregonstate.edu/SMS.
So after the many consoles had this battle for who wins, in the 70s the video game market was growing and had reached over $3.2 billion until 1977, when RCA and Fairchild decided to leave the market as replica Pong units and the like had oversaturated the available market space. The market began to stagnate as there were no new innovative games capturing the audience, and then when E.T. came out in 1983, it put nails in the coffin of many US-based gaming companies. A large crash hit the market, and over the next 2 years, almost 97% of the market vanished. The revenue dropped to $100 million. This hit to the American market allowed the Japanese company of Nintendo to fill the void. With this opportunity, they released the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, with many great titles, notably Excitebike, Mario, Donkey Kong, and Metroid. There are, of course, long lists of these, but as Nintendo grew in popularity, they began to release more and more well-received games. Sam, did you ever hear about the ET crash?
The E.T.?
Yeah.
Yeah, E.T. was kind of a big deal because it pretty much killed everything, which was also kind of shocking because E.T. was like the highest grossing movie that year, which is kind of sad that they had such a bad video game, which pretty much made the term video game tarnished.
Yeah. Well, moving on from that, Sega had some redemption. Sega had weathered the storm and wanted to be part of the success that Nintendo was experiencing. In 1991, they got their chance. They revolutionized the way that games were released with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 debuted. After Sonic ran any type of marketing campaign, they created hype. They established a date. They made a deal of it. Sonic Tuesday, as it's known, coming out on Tuesday, June 23rd, 1991. This event redefined how all video games were released from here on out. Now, stepping back for a moment, I have to mention The Legend of Zelda, which is a great game. But these platformer games weren't, well, this isn't a platformer game, but there were platformer games like Donkey Kong and Mario, and there always will be, but they were defining the genre. Same with like street fighting games. But Zelda decided to change that. It created a dedicated storyline that the player was able to interact with. It set the precedent that games don't just have to be an objective to achieve. The player can choose the ability. The character can develop a connection with each other. And the Zelda games have become legendary. They're still being made and they have gravity in many people's lives. All of these games are significant. Every Comic-Con that I go to, there are always individuals dressed up as characters from retro games. Whole booths that are stuffed full of these games and character merchandise. No one person would ever be able to do anything with all the merchandise out there. But coming into the mid to late 80s and 90s, there was a great time for video games with the release of Super Mario Bros. 2, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, Tetris, Doom, and Castlevania. Arcades were huge, and they grew as well as home consoles. Sam, you have anything to add in there?
About like Castlevania and like Tetris and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, any notable games you want to throw in there?
I'm a big fan of all of those games that you just said.
What are you playing right now?
I am playing Castlevania.
Castlevania. Notably, a great game. And I think one thing I didn't really mention is the impact that arcades have. You know, people would find quarters and they would love to go with their friends and go to these arcades and have fun. And there was a huge deal with it. But I'm feeling enough of this. How about a walk? You want to go for a walk, Sam?
Not really.
You don't want to go for a walk?
No.
Okay.
A bit
I guess
busy.
I'll just go for a walk and we'll leave him here. Do you want to clean this up?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit crowded by all this stuff.
All right. We'll see you back in a moment.
To generations from around the world.
Ability to play their own game.
That polar front coming straight down. I joined Orange Bean at work as a freshman. I think it was my second week of being a freshman here. And I was looking for an opportunity to get involved in something on campus. And I had done a little bit of high school journalism, not a lot, but I came up here to the 4th floor. I saw the TV studios, I saw the radio booth, I saw all the computers, and I thought, this is super cool. This is something I want to get involved in. And I joined the barometer team as a freshman. I learned so many things that I would have never learned in a classroom. Not only did I learn how to do journalism, how to design a newspaper, how to produce a TV show, I learned skills on top of that that are definitely going to help me in whatever I go do with my life. These past 4 years, OMN has meant to me to be a place where I can come and be myself, where I can come and challenge myself, push myself, learn and grow. It's a place where you come up here and you think you know who you are, you think you know the type of leader that you are, the type of person that you are, but you'll look back as a graduating senior 4 years later and think, wow, I am not the same person as I was when I stepped on this floor the very first time as a freshman. My name is Lauren Sless. I am the producer of Spotlight at KBVR TV at Orange Media Network.
Okay, let's take a stroll. We could rank video games and series all day long and discuss which one's better than the other, but when it comes down to it, that doesn't really matter. What matters is their social impact, the meaning that they've had, the groundwork that they've laid. We could talk about Zelda and Mario and Doom and Wolfenstein all day long, but I mean, those games have so much more than just a ranking to them. They mean so much to people, and they've become endeared and loved, and you know, there's remakes of them. There's so much content because of these games that, I mean, it's really incredible who they've reached. For example, about the impact. I was talking with my mother earlier this week, and I brought up the fact that we were talking about retro gaming for one of our episodes, and immediately there was a smile on her face as she remembered the first time she saw Pong. She went over to her cousin's house, and they had an Atari Pong hooked up to an old TV, and there was joy and excitement as everyone took turns playing it with each other, and it was a great bonding moment. I mean, it was really profound for her as well. This was the first time that they were able to control what was on their TV screen. It wasn't just content being aired to them. They had power over what was happening. We continued our conversation, and she went on to tell me about her first time playing arcade machines, especially Pac-Man. She loved it, and you know, her fond love of pinball machines. And you know, she told me her favorite game was Space Invaders. How she loved that it drew you in, that there was adrenaline in it, that it was so well made that, you know, she didn't want to stop playing it. And I think, you know, that is a great example of the impact that these games have had. It's not just a video game. It's a point of connection for people. It draws people in, it creates a community, and it's something that, you know, multiple people get to experience and enjoy together, but it's never exactly the same for one person. For me, Pac-Man and Super Mario Brothers will always have a place in my heart. They had meaning for me, and I loved them. I mean, I even found a way to download them onto my old iPhone and play them in my free time in between classes. They brought connection, they brought value and meaning. And you know, sometimes after a long, hard day at work, it enabled someone to come home and enjoy a little bit of something special. A character they had developed a relationship with, a story that they loved, and it enabled them to be anyone they wanted. You didn't have to be who you were. You could engross yourself in this world and have an adventure. For developers and creatives, it was a new outlet that enabled them to express themselves. It was content that hadn't been out there before. It was stories that, you know, they were actually able to make it so that the player could interact with. It was a whole new world. I mean, when you go to a movie, a story is just told and it happens to the viewer. Rather than in a video game, the story gets to be told in certain elements, but the viewer has control of what's happening. It was new, it's fun, it's creative, and it's still loved today. I mean, we have countless video games with that same storyline that was developed back in the 70s. I mean, I think the bottom line is really that retro games aren't just games. They've become endearment to a lot of people. They're loved and they're sought after. There's something that they've become a pastime for many people, and you know, they've influenced most of our modern games, if not all of them today. I mean, we could look at games like Cuphead and see the effects of those retro games still there. I mean, it's really powerful, and I mean, they're such great games that, I mean, Nintendo, look at their Switch system. They've put the NES and the SNES systems on there so that people can still enjoy them. And with that, I feel better. So we're gonna go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be back at the studio.
radio program. My roommate was a DJ, and I hopped on his show a couple times, and that was infatuating, and I immediately fell in love with being able to play whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and coming in late at night and sharing my music with whoever was awake at that time was just so exciting and so liberating. Just the ability to explore and learn so many things from so many different mediums is really what benefited me and my experience here in media. Coming out of here, I definitely think I'm going to be looking at the world in a more professional lens. I definitely think that, working as part of a team and making things for other people is something that I've definitely taken out of being here and being on the creative video team especially. My name is Ziad Al-Kaulak. I'm a creative video consultant, a senior studio engineer, and a professional conspirator here at Orange Media Network.
Hey, Sam.
Hey,
Where's Jachob?
I went out the door.
Do you have somebody hosting the show?
I mean, I'm here.
The prompters are still up. Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Oh, The Legend of Zelda. Okay. The original Zelda came out in 1986 and was a massive hit with its combination of action, role-playing, and open-world interaction. As Jachob mentioned earlier, this style of game had never been seen before. Instead of being fast-paced, it was suspenseful, unfolding the story behind the world as you move through it, creating a close bond not only with the characters, but with the experience as a result. The game and its sequels amassed a cult following that to this day is still going strong. Interestingly enough, the original Zelda was released on the first at-home cartridge that included a built-in battery for saving game data. With all the new innovations that were going into this game, Nintendo was concerned that players would get bored with the open-world aspect, the amount of time and thought that goes into exploring such a vast story. But as it turns out, players loved it, and any fears surrounding the game turned to inspiration for the development of further Legend of Zelda games. Isn't that cool, dude?
Yeah.
Okay, well next is Sonic. In the 1980s, Nintendo was on top, releasing hit after hit, essentially controlling the video game industry. Sega was determined to forge their place as a competitor and began releasing games to no success. They needed a mascot to fuel their systems. Thus came Sonic the Hedgehog into the video game world. Sonic was arguably the most vibrant and colorful platformer game at the time, which made it distinct and highly successful in marketing. And marketing was the key to Sega's success. Sonic was a different take on video game characters. Sonic and his friends were marketed like they were famous actors. So Sonic was thrust into the limelight, creating a new standard for characters and raised the bar for their competitors. And, as you know, Sonic was the one responsible for setting a new standard for video game releases as well.
Hey, Emma.
Hey, dude.
What you doing?
Well, you weren't here. Sam's busy, so I decided to jump in.
Yeah, man, you're really slacking this week.
That's fair enough. Okay, scoot over. Call me a slacker. I'm excited to have a co-host because, well, this one hasn't done much for me this episode.
He's got stuff to do.
I know, apparently. Well, have you talked about Doom yet?
Not yet.
Okay, well, when Doom came out in 1993, it was intense and dark. It was the equivalent of heavy metal for video games, and many people feared it, worrying about the effects of being a Marine on Mars killing demons would have. But despite the initial response, it gained quite a lot of popularity and quickly became the groundwork for many FPS shooter games. The game became so popular that it got a remake and is still a pop culture icon. The way that the original Doom was coded enables any device the ability to run this game, and that's been exploited by fans with everything from a printer to a graphing calculator running this iconic first-person shooter. I mean, isn't that cool? You can just run it on anything.
That is pretty cool.
All right, now the next game we have to talk about is Super
Mario Brothers. Mario Brothers has been one of the most influential games out there, and its reach has been international. Coming from Nintendo, it is in the top 10 most sold games with over 48 million copies being sold. Super Mario Brothers has been around for 35 years outside of the arcades, and the characters in 45 games, with 21 of them being main storyline games. It is a game still being played, with the latest version coming out just last year. Mario has become one of the most recognized characters, and when it comes to video games, is seen by many sources as the most recognized character in the world. This 2D platform game was successful, but after jumping into the third dimension with Super Mario 64, it left an impact on video games that was permanent. The success of the game helped Nintendo to gain its popularity in the US market and has made a lot of money.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess we'll just switch off then?
Yeah.
Okay. The next game is the Street Fighter games, specifically Street Fighter 2. It defined the fighting game genre with meaningful character selection, as each character had a unique fighting style based on the player's input. This new type of character format made it so the game had diversity in its actions and outcomes. It made it so the player could further develop their skills and fighting styles based on their preferred fighter. Street Fighter's 2 character selection style became the new universal method for future fighting games and later inspired Mortal Kombat to adopt the same features. The release of this game brought back a failing genre of games that, there hadn't been enough movement to stay relevant with the fast-paced development of FPS and adventure games.
So next we have Castlevania. Castlevania, what is the hardest game that you have ever beaten? How long did it take you? What challenges did you face? In today's gaming world, there are plenty of challenging games: Dark Souls, Sekiro, even Super Meat Boy. Back in the 80s, Castlevania was a landmark in challenging games. Its design, enemies, and story led you on a difficult and perilous endeavor, which challenged gamers to be at their best. This game has become a cornerstone in speedruns and has remained one of the more daunting tasks for gamers to complete. The platformer has earned its place as a retro icon from its thoughtful design and amazing story. So if you are feeling up to the challenge, give Castlevania a shot. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
I mean, Castlevania is a tough game.
It really is.
Wouldn't you agree, Sam?
What? What game?
Castlevania.
Oh, yeah, I love Castlevania.
Now, to finish off our game list, Pokemon. With the release of the first Pokemon games, Red and Blue, it took a growing franchise and made it into a cultural pillar for kids around the world. These 2 games started off a gaming series and fantasy world that today is a household name and possibly one of the most known series in the world. Pokemon is the biggest media franchise in the world with an estimated $95 billion revenue, and just the games are part of it. In the franchise, they have cards and TV series and movies and figurines. Just the impact of Pokemon and the love for it can be seen by the Pokemon Go boom that over 1 billion people have joined in on by downloading the application. With the amount of Pokemon games and content out there, we couldn't cover it in a day. But the original games are some of the most critically acclaimed out there, and so impactful.
They really are.
I mean, they are huge. What do you think, Sam?
It's Pikachu.
It's Clefairy.
Ooh, there is some controversy there.
Sadly, that is all the time we have for tonight. You might be thinking, oh, we didn't mention my favorite game, and you're right, we didn't. There are so many awesome retro games, but we still want to know what your favorite retro game is. Please reach out and let us know what your favorite game is and why. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and we hope you tune in next week as we talk about another awesome topic. Also check out more content by KBVR TV by checking out our YouTube page, where all the full videos are posted. If you want to keep up with the show and the rest of KBVR TV's awesome productions, you should also check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, where we post constant updates and tons of extra content. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.
Hey, when are we starting the show?